77. Amri Seir Rosh Chodesh Itzrachalei. There is a chiddush why the Mishnah mentioned that the goats that are brought on Rosh Chodesh are also brought b'tumah, because Sal Kedaitich Amin Halok Siv B'hu Moed, when it defines a yontif and it says Moed, and it gives it a specific date. So that's why I understand why a certain korban is doicha Shabbos or doicha Tumah, but it never says Moed by Rosh Chodesh. Kamash Malon, to teach me the chiddush, the Rosh Chodesh Ikrim Moed. Kidabaya, Damar Abaya, Tammuz, the High Shaita, in the year that the Meraglim were sent by Moshe Rabbeinu, and then they came back on Tisha B'Av, and they gave a bad report, and it became because they cried. When they came back, Hashem says, "Listen, you cried for no reason. I will give you a reason to cry on Tisha B'Av." That year, Tammuz, which is normally a 29-day month, was a 30-day month. Diksiv kara alai moyed lishbor bachurai. I called Rosh Chodesh that year a moed because I made it a mole in order to make it out so that when they came back after 40 days, it would land on Tisha B'Av. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been on Tisha B'Av. It would have been one day earlier. So the Gemara asks, L'meimer de kulami moed asu? Are you telling me that the din that korbanos are doicha Shabbos and doicha Tumah, we learn that out from Moed? Menon and Mili, how do you know that? The Ton Rabbana. Vaydaber Moshe es modeh Hashem. Ma Talmud Lomar, what is that teaching? Lefi Shalom Madnu Tamidu Pesach. Only by the Korban Tamid and by the Korban Pesach does it say Moado. Shenemar Bahu Moado. Afilu b'Shabbos, b'Moyad, afilu b'Tumah. So that's by the Tamid and the Pesach. Shar korbanot tzibur minayim. How do I know other korbanot tzibur have the same din? Shenemar eile ta'asu l'Hashem b'moadechem. Okay, so you included korbanot tzibur. Minay l'Rabbis oimer v'akorevimo shtei lechem v'akorevimo. How do we know to include the minchas oimer on the second day of Pesach, and Shtei Alechem on Shavuos, and the Shtei Chvasim? Talmud Loimar, that's why we need that pasuk. Vaydaber Moshe es moyadei Hashem l'bnei Yisrael, mentions moyadei. Hakasuv kavoi moyed echad l'kul. They're all considered moyed. Now, v'chol hani lamali, why did I need 3 different psukim of moyadoi? Both by the Korban Pesach and Tamid, both by the Korbanos Tzibur, and by the Shtei Alechem and the Minchas Oimer. Why? Why couldn't I learn one and I learn all of them from one? Tzrichi, I need it. Because Rachmana Tamid, if the Torah would have only written Moyado by Tamid, Havamina Tamid, you know what? There's a reason why the Tamid is Doicha Shabbos and Doicha Tumah. Shekain, Tadir, V'cholil. It has 2 stringent aspects. It's offered every day of the year, so it's tadir, and it's completely burnt to Hashem. Nobody eats it. But I would think of a Pesach, which is not tadir, not kol low, kamash malon, that I had to be told about the Pesach as well, because Rachmana Pesach, and if I would have only been told about the Korban Pesach moyadoi, so you know why Pesach is doicha Shabbos and doicha Tumah? Pesach shu onush kares. That's because if I don't bring the Korban Pesach, I get kares. Aval Tomid, they ain't onush kares. There is no kares if you don't bring the Tomid. So I would think maybe it's not Doicha Shabbos and Doicha Tumah. Emalo. Kamash Malon, I needed to learn it by the Pesach, by the Tomid as well. Because Rachmanani Tarti, maybe the Gemara is going to say, I could learn that from a combination of the Pesach and Tomid to teach me the other dinim. Hava mina hani hu yesh ben tzad chamor. I would say no, because the Pesach and the Tamid each have a stringency. Tamid tadir v'chalil, it's brought every day and it's completely consumed. Pesach shonosh kares. Aval shar korbanos tzibur, which are not Todd, you're not called Emalo. I would think maybe they're not Doicha Shabbos and Doicha Tuma. Kosav Rachmana, Eila Tasul Hashem, B'moyadechem, even whatever date they fall on, you bring them, even if it's Shabbos, even if you're in Tuma. Fine. Because Rachmana Eila Tasul Hashem Moadechem, having a shar karbonet tzibur aboin lechaper. The various karbonet tzibur, for example, the korban musaf, the ola is mechaperes for assays that people violated. Aval oimer shtei alechem, which is not for kapara, the ein bar lechapara lahatir, the almaninu, both the oimer and the shtei alechem come to permit something. Of course, we know the oimer comes to permit you to eat the new grain, the chodosh. And the offering of the shtei alechem comes to allow you to bring korbanei mincha from the new grain. So since they're not lechaper, they're only lahatir, I would think, they're not docha Shabbos and docha Tuma, Kamash Malon, that they are. Because Oimer Shtei Alechem, L'chudayu. Maybe I could have learned from the Oimer Shtei Alechem. No. Havamina Adarabba, Oimer Shtei Alechem Dalimi. They are stronger because they actually accomplished something. They matter Klal Yisrael to eat Chodosh. The boy Lahatir, Aval Hanech. But other Korbanis, Korbanei Tzibur, for example, that do not come to be matir. Maybe they would not be Doicha Shabbos and Doicha Tuma, Kamash Malon, that they're all Doicha. Period. Now, Savrua, right now, up till now, we have been learning that in those cases where you're allowed to bring, for example, the Korban Pesach in a state of Tumah, it's not that it's a complete heter. It's not hutra, even though the Torah allows you to bring it in a state of tumah. It's not a heter gomer. Since there's no tohorim, there's no alternative. So you need the tzitz that the Kohen Gadol wore on his head to be meratzeh, because it's not a complete heter. It's just a dichui. Uboitz it's a ratzos. The leka tana de shamas le de omer tuma hutra b'tzibel Rabbi Yehuda, because the only tana who holds that it's a complete heter and doesn't need it tzitz to be meratzeh is Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya. Tzitz, the head plate, which says Kodesh LaHashem, that the Kohen Gadol wore as part of his 8 begadim. Bein sheyesh al mitzcho, bein she'ein al mitzcho, whether it's on his forehead, whether it's not on his forehead, meratzeh div Rab Shimon. The presence of the tzitz, not necessarily that he's wearing it, but the presence of the tzitz is what is meratzeh korbanei that were brought betuma. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no. Oideo al mitzcho, if it's on his forehead, meratzeh. Ein oideo al mitzcho, ein meratzeh. It's dependent on whether Kohen is wearing it. The pasuk says, "V'haya al meitzach Aaron, v'nasa Aaron et avon hakodashim asher yagdishu bnei Yisrael." So, Amar Rabbi Shimon, Kohen Gadol b'yom HaKippurim yochiach. I'll prove to you that you don't need the tzitz being worn, because the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur doesn't wear the 8 begadim. He wears the 4 big day lavam. He's not wearing the tzitz. She'eino al mitzcho u'meratzeh. And yet it's meratzah for Tumas Yisrael. Omer lo hanach Yom HaKippurim, don't bring me a proof from Yom Kippur, shetuma hutra b'tzibur. There, Yom Kippur, when you do it in the state of Tumah, it's hutra. Completely. So here's the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda that says it's hutra. Michlal, the Rabbi Shimon saw Tumah d'chuyehi b'tzibur. Rabbi Shimon, therefore, must hold it's not a heter legamri. He requires the tzitz. Now, even though there are people who say that the tzitz is meratzeh, kula alma einat tzitz meratzeh alachilos. It doesn't help in terms of kapara for people who ate meat of a korban that became tamei. It's only maratzeh if you threw something that was tamei on the mizbeach, or the hakrava of a korban in a state of tumah, but not an achila. Lekatana deshamislei, because there are no other tanas that have shown us the Omar tzitz maratz al achilos el Rabbi Yezer. That the tzitz, the only person who says that the tzitz is maratz on eating besar tomei is Rabbi Yezer, Titania. Rabbi Yezer oimer tzitz maratz al achilos. Rabbi Yosi oimer ein tzitz maratz al achilos. Now, name him as Nisan, the Lok Rabbi Yeshua. Now, our Mishnah, which said that all of these korbanos could be brought in a state of tumah even though you don't eat them, you bring them. The tzitzis maratza for the akrava b'tumah, but it doesn't allow you to eat it. So our Mishnah, who said that, the Gemara is going to say, must not be like Rabbi Yeshua, the Tanya. The pasuk says, "Vasisa olosecha," you should make your olah habasar v'hadam. Right? There's two components to korban olah. You have the meat, you have the blood. You do zrika sadam, and then you throw the meat on the mizbech as well. Rabbi Yeshua oimer, depends. Im ein dam, ein basar. Let's say the blood spilled or became tamei, so you don't throw the meat on the mizbech, and vice versa. Ein bas, im ein basar, ein dam. If there's no meat remaining, because it also got lost or tamei, you don't do zrika, and therefore the korban oila is not maratza. Rabbi Yezer oimer dam aval pisha ein basar. You throw the dam, and the korban is maratza, even if there's no meat left. Shene'amar the dam zvachecha yishafech. The blood of your korban you should pour. So, if that's the case, mani mekayim vasisa losecha basar v'dam, then what's this pasuk that your olah should be a combination of meat and blood? If according to Rabbi Yezer, all you have to do is throw the dam even though there's no meat, how do you fulfill that pasuk? So, loy melocha, to teach me another din. Ma dam bezrika. How do you offer the dam? You actually throw it on the mizbeach. Af basar bezrika. The meat was also not placed on the mizbeach. You threw it. How do you know that? Have you oimer lul cotton yesh ben kevesh la mizbeach? There was a ramp going up to the mizbeach, and according to this mandama, there was a space between the ramp and the mizbeach. It's called a lul cotton. Therefore, you couldn't just drag it from the ramp on the mizbeach. You had to throw it, and that fulfills this. Just like the dam has to be nizrak, the basar has to be nizrak as well. Rabbi Yeshua nami haksi v'dam zvecha yishafech l'chora. There's a pasuk that says you should pour the blood no matter what. So how could you, Rabbi Yeshua, hold that if there's no meat, you don't throw the blood? Because it says over there, dam zvecha yishafech v'basar tochel. Which means, unless you have meat to eat or to throw on the mizbeach, you don't throw the dam. So those psukim, hani trei kroi lamali. So for Rabbi Yeshua, why do you need both of these psukim? Chad be'oila, b'chad b'shlami. As vachecha refers to shlami. And why couldn't I learn one out from the other? Tzricha. I can't. The ikos of Rachmana, the oila. If the Torah would have only given me these dinim by oila, havamina oila hi, the chamira. Maybe it's only by oila because it's more stringent. Shekain kolil. Nobody eats from an oila. It's completely burned. Abal shlamim delo chamiri. Shlamim are eaten by the kohanim, by the bailim. Emalo. So maybe it would not have this requirement because Rachmana shlamim. If the Torah would have only written it by Shlamim Havamina Adarabba, it's more chomer the isbu shtei achilos. Both the korban eats because you throw the emurim on the korban, and the human being eats. Aval ola, the less peish achilas, there's only one achila, meaning you throw the whole thing on the korban, on the mizbeach. Emalo. Kamash Malana had to be taught both by Noel and Shlomo. So Rabbi Yezer, who holds that you can throw the dam even though there's no meat, what does he do with the pasuk Haksiva Basar Tochal? You have to eat the meat. So Amar Lachor, Rabbi Yezer says, I use it for a different halacha. Hahuma boile she'ena basar muter bachila achi zarkadam. This teaches us the fundamental rule that you're not allowed to engage in eating of the meat until you throw the blood. The zrika is the matir to eat the meat. Maybe all the psukim then come to teach me that. Dam, afal pi she'ein sham basar minala. So, where did he learn the din that you can do the zrika of the dam even though if there is no meat? First, you should say you eat the meat. Like it said before, it placed the meat before the dam. How come they put the dam first? That you can do this dam zrika even though there's no meat left. The kadima, the placement of dam before the word basar teaches me that din that you cannot eat the meat until you do the zrikas of the dam. So that's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yoshua, who doesn't allow you to do the zrika without the basar, how does he learn the din that you need the zrika hadam before you eat the meat? Kavachomer. He doesn't need a pasuk. He learns it out from logic. He says like this: Uma emurin. The emurin are the innards, which are offered on the mizbeach. Uma emurin dechilesnu lo makvi. Now, everybody holds that if for some reason the emurim got lost or tomei, that's not ma'akev kapora. However, ki isinu. But when you have them around, ma'akvi, if you don't do it, dam. But blood, the chilesa, if you don't have blood, certainly is ma'akev. There's no kapor of the korban unless you have dam. So ki isse lo kol sheken ma'akev. So if it's present, it hasn't been lost, certainly it would be ma'akev. So Rabbi Yeshua doesn't need a pasuk. He learns it out from the svara. How come Rabbi Eliezer needs a pasuk even though there's a kavachomer? Milsa, the asa b'kavachomer tarch v'kos of lakra. Because there are many examples where even though you could technically learn it out through a kavachomer, the Torah still gives you a pasuk. What does Rabbi Yeshua say about that? No, you don't necessarily, wherever, you should still do the drasha when you have the capability of doing the drasha. So again, we say, Hashta Lema Masnisim Blok Rabbi Yeshua. Our Mishnah, which says 5 korbanos that you're allowed to bring betuma even though you don't eat it, our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yeshua, that says you don't offer these things unless there's meat left. Right? The Kivin to Amar Bein and Tarti, he says you need both the dam and the basar. And the tzitz, according to Rabbi Yeshua, achila lo meratza. It's only meratza for korbanos that are placed on the mizbech betuma. But for people to eat a basar that's tameh, the tzitz doesn't work for hechi asi betuma. How are these korbanos? We have to have eating of the meat. How are they brought betuma? There's not going to be any meat eaten. And if there's no meat eaten, because the basar is tameh, how do you do this dam? And if you can't do the dam, you don't have kapara. So our Mishnah must not be like Rabbi Yeshua. And for the Gemara, Afilu Tem Rabbi Yeshua. No, we can learn our Mishnah even according to this sheet of Rabbi Yeshua. El Ksav Rabbi Yeshua tzitz meratz ala oilen. Fine, the tzitz is not meratz on achila, but it's meratz al tumas haniktor mal ishim. The various items that became tameh that were thrown on the mizbeach, like if the meat of an ola became tameh, You throw the meat anyways, because that's what the tzitz is maratza for. Things that are eaten by the mizbeach, but not necessarily eaten by the human being. And therefore, Rabbi Yeshua would admit that as long as there's a kazayas chaylev of the emurim for the mizbech to eat it, to consume it, then you can do zrikas adam. Fine. That covers all blood korbanos, where you have blood, and then you have either chaylev or dam, chaylev or basar, the ikka oil. Those are examples of things that eventually you're going to place on the mizbeach. Ela oimer shtei alechem. These are menachos, where you just bring flour, you do kmitza, and then you throw the kmitza of the flour onto the mizbeach, but there's no chaylev, there's no basar, there's no dam. The leka oilin, so ma ikle meimar. There's no aktor by the shirayim. That which is left, you don't throw on the mizbeach. And since Rabbi Yeshua needs two, that both the koimetz and the shirayim have to exist, and here there's no shirayim because they're tamei, and the shtei alechem, which is completely eaten, you don't even have one. So Rabbi Eliezer has no problem because he holds that sits as maratza for achilos. But we said that Rabbi Yeshua doesn't hold like that. Ma'ikal meimar. So Amri, so ki om Rabbi Yeshua nami debin tarti bezvachim. You know what? When Rabbi Yeshua said you need two, that you need dam and basar, it's only by zvachim. But he never said that din b'menachos. B'menachos lo yomar. Freit the Gemara of b'menachos lo yomar. What do you mean he didn't say it by menachos? Vatnan. Nitnu shireha. If the shirayim, meaning the remaining flour, after you do the kmitza, got lost, or got tamei, or avdu shireha, they got lost, so then we're back to the machlokes Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. Kmitas Rabbi Eliezer ksheira, because you don't need both. As long as you have the kmitza, you throw the kmitza and the mincha is accepted. Kmitas Rabbi Yeshua psula. But the way Rabbi Yeshua learns that you need two, the basar and the dam, he continues the learning until menachos as well, that you need two. And for the Gemara, no. Kemidas v'lo kemidas. It's like their shita, but not fully. Kemidas Rabbi Yeshua debin and tarti. You need both, kmitza and shirayim. But v'lo kemidas Rabbi Yeshua, the Rabbi Yeshua bezvachim omar, that you need both, but menachos lo omar. And you can get away with one. Now that Tana, who is that Tana? That is the index case that even by menachos you need two. Who is more machmer than even Rabbi Yeshua? Is there such a Tana? The odd Tanya Rabbi Yossi. Roya anias devir Rabbi Eliezer menachos of his vachim. I see the shita of Rabbi Eliezer that you only need one. You don't need two. By menachos of vachim, devir Rabbi Yeshua bezvachim of menachos. Now, how could he hold like both of them? Devir Rabbi Eliezer bezvachim shaya oimer dam afal pishein basar shein sham basar. That you can do the zrika of the dam even though there's no meat. And I hold like devir Rabbi Yeshua bezvachim shaya oimer im ein dam ein basar. If you don't have dam, you can't throw the meat. And main basar in dam. You can throw the kmitza even though there's no flour left. You see, this Tana that we just quoted holds that Rabbi Yeshua extends his requirement of both to menachos as well. So how do you learn that our Mishnah is according to the sheet of Rabbi Yeshua? So you have to say, Ksav Rabbi Yeshua, Hatzitz Meratza ala oilin ve'ala achilos. In order to fulfill our Mishnah that all those 5 karbonos could be brought in a state of tumah, it's because according to Rabbi Yeshua, that tzitz is Meratza, not just for things betuma that are put on the mizbeach, but even if people eat basar tameh. So ihachi amai kemidas Rabbi Yeshua psula. If you're telling me that Rabbi Yeshua allows it, then why would you say Rabbi Yeshua passes? So the Gemara says he passes avod v'saruf. He's more lenient by tumah. If the item got lost or burned and it's not around, so enechan nami, in that case Rabbi Yeshua passes. But with tumah, since there is the tzitz is not maratza for things that are lost or burned. The tzitz is only maratza for things that are tameh. But if it became tameh, he holds like Rabbi Eliezer. So pshita hashli yishlam of the saruf. If Rabbi Eliezer holds that even if it's not physically around, it got lost or burned, the lesson machshir Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer permits nitma the itzim and boy. Would there be any reason to tell me the din Rabbi Eliezer about tumah? Certainly, since if the meat became tameh, the meat is extant, it's present. If you tell me even if it's not present, Rabbi Eliezer allows you to throw the blood, then what's the big chiddush about tumah? Certainly, it would be allowed. Ela pshita Rabbi Yeshua ktani psula. So in Chanami, it's not the Mishnah is not according to Eliezer, it's according to Rabbi Yeshua, and he passes, but he passes only of the soruf if it got lost or burned, but not if it's tameh. The Otani Rabbi Yeshua Omer calls zvachim shebetoira. All korbanos, bein shenit mebasar v'chelev kayim. As even if the meat became tameh, but you have some chelev. Uvein shenit b'chelev v'basar kayim. Or the chelev is tameh, which makes it invalid, but the basar is around. Zoyrek esadam. You can do zrika and the korban has kapora. Aval nidmu tarvayu. If you have nothing left because both the basar and the chelev had become tameh, then you can't throw the blood low. So based on that, we're back to al miksav Rabbi Yeshua. Why shouldn't it work? If the tzitz is maratza for things that are tameh that are put on the mizbeach, or things that people eat in a state of tumah, then why would Rabbi Yeshua passel? El Eloi Rabbi Yeshua, he must sneeze. Our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yeshua. You're bringing me examples Rabbi Yeshua does not accept. Loi kasha, kan lechatchila, kan b'diavad. That means lechatchila. Rabbi Yeshua says if you don't have both the chelev and the basar, you shouldn't do the zrika. But if b'diavad you did the zrika, it works. That's what our Mishnah is saying. Right? Rabbi Yeshua lechatchila. When do we say that Rabbi Yeshua says you can't be makriv? That's lechatchila. But b'diavad he doesn't say that you can't be makriv. Now, what hat did you just pull that out of? Umanat Tamra, where do you see a precedent, the Shani Leila Rabbi Yeshua ben lechatchila l'diavad, that you could say this concept that maybe when Rabbi Yeshua pasoled, it's only lechatchila, but b'diavad he permits. Where do you get this? I'll show you where he gets it. He gets it from a paraisa, the Tanya. Nitma basar, if the meat became tameh, or nifsal, let's say it was taken out of the azara, right? Shiyatza chutz l'kloim. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, you can still yizarek, you can still throw the blood. Rabbi Yeshua Omer lo yizarek. However, here comes the kicker. Umoyde Rabbi Yeshua shim zara kortza. And chanami, that's b'diavad. I mean, l'chatchila you shouldn't do it, but b'diavad if you threw it, it works. Now we're going to push this teretz off, this teretz of lechatchila versus b'diavad. Chada, one problem, psula diavad mashma. When it says in the Baraisa, kemidas Rabbi Yeshua psula, pasul also means even b'diavad, it wouldn't work. V'od, it says chamisha dvorim boyim. 5 korbanos are brought. That's lechatchila mashma. That sounds like you're talking lechatchila, not b'di'evet. So the Gemara has to go back on what it said. Loy kasha, the stira between our Mishnah and the sources you brought in Rabbi Yoshua that it doesn't work depends. Kan b'yachid. When is it asur lechatchila? That's if a yachid does it. But lechatchila, you are allowed to do it is b'tzibur. When it's a korban tzibur and the whole Klal Yisrael is doing it, then it's permitted according to Rabbi Yoshua even lechatchila. Okay, so tomorrow.
Ernie, can that by Pigul? Don't we say by Pigul that if it's a